Welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm Pamela Price, your host, and I'm so excited tonight. We are at the Commonwealth Club for World Affairs in San Francisco at the premiere of the documentary of the legacy and the history and the work of John Burris, the Godfather of Police Litigation. We're going to talk to Doug Harris, the producer, and his co-producer Brian Spencer, and maybe some other folks, special folks tonight. It's a special night in San Francisco, and we are excited to bring this to you. For those who are just new to the show, my name is Pamela Price. I'm a civil rights attorney, an advocate, and a champion for justice. Welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered.
My name is Robert Melton. I'm the co-chair for the Arts Forum here at the Commonwealth Club World Affairs. Tonight we're very excited to debut this amazing film documentary on John Burris, his life, that talks about police brutality and some of his high-profile cases here. And the reason why I brought this film here is because what's happening in the world today, especially with the new administration, everything's getting rolled back, dismantled. And that film is so timely. You know, it's it talks about those issues. And so hopefully this will bring awareness to that, to the people here tonight seeing this film.
All right, I am here in San Francisco at the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco, and we've just seen the amazing documentary film, John Burris, the Godfather of Litigation, and I am here with one of the co-producers, Brian Spencer, who is amazing and involved. You want to tell the audience why you decided to do this project?
Absolutely. Thank you, Pam, for having us with you this evening.
Yes.
A couple of reasons that we completed the documentary. It's part of the Cal Alumni Profiles series. So we are determined to highlight outstanding Cal alums who have been overlooked in a way. As Chancellor Emeritus Chris said, Cal needs to do a little bit better job acknowledging their alums.
Yes.
So that was the original intention. We're also developing content for the upcoming ethnic studies graduation requirement for California high school students.
Excellent, excellent. All right. And how long have you been involved in making these documentaries, Brian?
Well, my good friend Doug, who I knew in a previous life, we did a lot of community work decades ago. He called me just before the COVID epidemic and asked if I wanted to do some filmmaking. So Walter Gordon was our first film.
Okay.
First black grad of Berkeley Law. And we were recommended to Mr. Burris by one of his classmates. So she asked me to give John a call. I did that, and here we are with film number 2 under our belt.
Excellent, excellent. Well, the Walter Gordon film was quite the documentary, and certainly so overdue and so amazing to have that history documented. And as someone that graduated from UC Berkeley Law School and never heard of Walter Gordon, I was like, this is amazing.
Yes.
So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Pam, and you've had a wonderful career. We've been able to learn a lot about you through the John Burris process.
Yes.
And just exceptionally happy that you would choose to spend a little time with us.
Of course, I'm so honored to have been included in the documentary, and I'm so appreciative that you have chronicled the work that John has done over so many years. That has been so important.
Yes.
The civil rights issue, as I said in the film, we have often had to deal with police brutality. That has been part of our experience throughout in the Americas. And so having someone like John take that on as, you know, has been just amazing and really, really significant.
And your work as well. You've been courageous in some of the cases that you have taken on.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Of course, of course. Well, you know, game recognized game.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly.
John and I have been friends for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
You're
thank
very
you for
welcome.
joining Pamela Price Unfiltered.
My pleasure.
Okay, thanks. When I came out of law school and I was waiting for my bar results, I contacted John and asked if I could start working for him. And so he said, yeah, he had some work to do. And so he hired me as an intern, as a post-bar clerk. And eventually I was working for John, working on civil rights cases, watching him work on cases, going to court with him, watching him.
Pamela Price started with me as a very young lawyer. I brought her in on a case when she first got out of law school. And at the very beginning, I could see that she was a dedicated, tough lawyer.
John Burris was the person who was, in fact, holding police accountable and standing up for the Black community. And that was a very inspirational position that he represented.
Now, she developed a really good practice in terms of civil rights and employment work, and particularly around prison work. And I helped her with some of those cases. And we did some good work together in those areas. So, but as a civil rights lawyer, there's not anybody more fiercely committed to the work than she. I thought, bar none.
All right, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm Pamela Price, your host, and I am delighted to be here tonight with Doug Harris, the executive producer and the Renaissance man of documentaries, who has produced the documentary about police accountability, John Burris, the Godfather of Police Litigation. Doug, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered.
Thank you, Pamela.
Yes, can you tell our audience, Doug, what drove you to make this film?
Well, a year ago, I did a film called All American, which was the Walter Gordon story. And so I needed a civil rights attorney, a very prominent civil rights attorney, to appear in that film, because Walter Gordon was the first civil rights attorney here in the Bay Area, Black civil rights attorney. And so in seeking out a person to take on that role, I sought out John Burris, because he's pretty much the preeminent civil rights attorney, not only here in the Bay Area, but around the country. So John and I, we made a deal that if he appeared in my documentary about Walter Gordon, that I would work with him to look into telling his story.
Excellent. So why did you think it was important to tell John Burris' story, Doug?
Well, as a person who's really concerned about civil rights for people everywhere, and in particular those who have been hurt by police misconduct, I thought that this would be like a really important story to tell, because John Burris, not only is he one of our top civil rights attorneys, but through his story, you can learn the story about other great civil rights attorneys like yourself.
Thank you, thank you. So what was it that made you want to include me in the film, Doug? And I'm honored to have been part of your documentary. Thank you.
Well, in working with John to do his story, one day I asked John, I said, John, you have hundreds of proteges, people that you've mentored over the years. I said, John, who is your top protege out of all the people you've worked with over the years? And he told me it was Pamela Price.
Wow.
And
wow.
let me also add, as I was learning John Burris' story, and I started to find out all the different cases that you were involved with John, and you started your career with John Burris.
I did.
And so, it was like, if I don't have the very first person that he worked with in working with civil rights litigation, I don't really have no film. So it was really a pleasure to include you into the story, because as a filmmaker, you've been involved. As a filmmaker, I realized that you have been involved with some of John's most seminal cases. And so to have a voice from a person that was actually working on those cases is really special to me as a filmmaker.
Yeah, well, thank you. It was special to me to be part of the film, and the documentary is an incredible chronicling of the history of not only John Burris, but of the development of police litigation in this country and the fight for civil rights, right? Which is really about holding police accountable, because often for government, the first and the only contact that some people have with government is through the police. And so it's so important that we work to hold police accountable and that we make sure that police actually serve the communities that we pay them to serve in a respectful and an honorable manner. And so this film is really an incredible work. So thank you for bringing that to us and creating this documentation for the world and for the history.
One of the things that I'd like to add is that, I'm a Berkeley native and resident. And what I'm working to do is to document the history of the community which I'm from, and that's Berkeley. And so this documentary film is part of a series of documentaries in conjunction with the University of California at Berkeley, which we know as Cal. And so this project that I'm doing is called the Cal Alumni Profile Series.
Wow.
And so it's real special to get you, Pamela, as part of the documentary because you're a graduate of Cal.
I am a Cal alumni. I came here to go to law school and I got a great education at UC Berkeley, and I got a wonderful opportunity to practice civil rights law for almost 40 years in the East Bay in Alameda County, and to use not only the lessons learned from greats like John Burris, from Howard Moore, and I'm honored to say that I was sworn in by Clint White. That is a once in a lifetime thing that, no one can take that from me. So I'm really, I was steeped in UC Berkeley and proud to be an alumni. So thank you for doing that project as well and doing the Walter Gordon story, which was incredible. Great documentary work there. Thank you, Doug. You're doing the thing.
Thank you, Pamela.
All right, welcome back to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm Pamela Price, your host, and today we have been talking about the documentary John Burris, The Godfather of Police Litigation and Police Accountability. And we have, as I said in the documentary, in the history of America, we have often come up against the hard rock of police brutality. That has been part of the American experience. In more recent times, as we talk about lawyers and the struggle for civil rights lawyers holding police accountable, there's been a straight line from, the Rodney King case in 1991, which was March of 1991, so it was a long time ago. But then you had Trayvon Martin, you had Oscar Grant, and more recently you had Ahmaud Arbery, and then there was George Floyd. And so there's a constant theme of police brutality in America. And the real constant is that courageous civil rights lawyers like John Burris and my guest today, Adante Pointer, have been on the front lines of holding police accountable. Adante is an Oakland native. He has been dedicated his life to, and his career, to holding law enforcement accountable. He has been celebrated as someone that is making a difference in Alameda County and California. He's a graduate of UC Berkeley and Hastings Law School. Go Bears. He began his career at the renowned civil rights law firm of John L. Burris, where he spent over 16 years representing families who were the victims of police violence. In 2020, Adante and his partner, Patrick Buelna, founded a premier law firm, Lawyers for the People. Prior to that, during the many years that he was with John Burris, he played a key role in many high-profile cases, including the Oscar Grant case, Tupac, and other cases that gave him the criteria and the credibility to establish his own firm and to make it happen. And he's been doing that, and we're going to talk about some of the high-profile cases that he and Patrick have been able to successfully shepherd, representing families and seeking justice. And he's continuing his mission to fight systemic racism and police accountability. So Adante, welcome to the show, Pamela Price Unfiltered, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I mean, I appreciate the platform that you've created, the opportunity, if you will, and the window to have real analysis, deep critical thinking, and to give people and the issues that affect people a platform, if you will, to really be discussed and heard. So thank you very much for having me, but the thanks goes right back to you for doing such a phenomenal job.
Yeah, no, thank you. We are honored to have you and to have you in our community. So one of the high profile cases that you worked on that really resonated in Alameda County, and ultimately it started here on the BART station at the Fruitvale BART station, and ultimately became an international case that had international consequences. And that's the Oscar Grant case. Can you share with our audience today what it was like to work on the Oscar Grant case?
To work on the Oscar Grant case was unlike any other legal experience I've had to date, in that this was a case that really resonated, that captivated the entire Bay Area, in particular Oakland. And it was one of the cases where the entire city was essentially up in arms and took up arms in order to force the district attorney to actually charge and criminally prosecute Johannes Messerly for taking Oscar's life. Keep in mind, many of the things that we see today in terms of viral videos, Oscar Grant's case was the first one. This is when cell phone footage was in its infancy. And so I lived with that case from the point of that moment when I saw that horrific video to this very day as I sit here on your podcast.
Right. Excellent. And excellent work. And we know, yes, there was a fight to get Messerly charged. There was a fight to get Anthony Perrone charged. And, you know, the DA took a different approach with Anthony Perrone. I know that the family for years afterwards still wanted the district attorney's office to actually charge Perrone. But ultimately, my predecessor in that office chose a different path. So tell us about some of the other high-profile cases you worked on while you were with the Burris law firm.
Sure. There's quite many I could choose from, but those that kind of pop into mind now. One would be actually my first federal civil rights trial, which was the Tory Smith case. Two decorated, in fact, they were both had received awards for Officers of the Year for the state of California. They saw it to be within their power, abuse of their power, if you will, to try to railroad a parolee who lived in Oakland and try to squeeze him for information about somebody that he didn't even know about. And they planted a gun on him and sent him, their plan was to send him to prison unless he squealed or provided information about some other gangster that they were interested in. He held his ground. They took him into custody. They tried to destroy his life. Ultimately, he came to the Burris firm. We took that case to trial, myself and Ben Niesenbaum, and were able to achieve justice for him to the tune of setting a record at that time of $6 million plus. But you know, the money is never enough because money comes and goes. But when you're facing that type of pressure, when the government is putting its full weight upon you, and you know all too well when it says the state of California versus blah, 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 you feel that when you're standing in that criminal courtroom.
Right.
And so we were very happy to get him justice he deserved.
And so now, though, you have formed this amazing law firm, and you and Patrick just got out there and took off. So tell us what some of the high-profile cases are that you and Patrick have been winning since 2020.
Thank you. Well, you know, I like to say we're trying to learn, you know, from sitting at the elbows of yourself, Mr. Burris, who really trailblazers in this practice area and keepers of the flame, if you will, as it relates to civil rights. You know, we just see ourselves as we're holding the flame for the next leg of this marathon, of this race, or if you will, this generation. And so we started a firm, Pointer Buelna, Lawyers for the People, in 2020. And just some of the cases that we take a lot of pride in particular, is the Maurice Monk case, a man who was in Santa Rita jail, laying there in distress, dying, and ultimately, we're not even sure how long he was there, passed away. But at least, you know, they're saying maybe upwards of 3 days, lying there in a state of medical emergency, and no one cared. And the guards came in, they threw his pills in, they threw his meds in. No one cared enough showed enough humanity to actually go in there and look and see why a person had been in the same position for 3 days, laying in their excrement, laying in their own urine, laying in, their what their body has done in terms of decomposing, not eating, not talking, not taking any meds. So that took hundreds of man and woman hours of looking at all kind of body worn cameras and going through thousands of pages of documents and kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle together in order to show that the way in which the jail and the sheriff's office had contacted his family and told them that he died by natural causes, and they were sorry, but there was nothing that they did or nothing that they could do when that was everything but the truth. That was not only a conspiracy as it relates to what happened to him, but in the cover up as well. And so we were able to shine the light on what was really going on in terms of the conditions and get him and his family a very large settlement, which was, I believe, record breaking. But once again, we could focus on the money, but I like to think to myself, the money in some ways is just a sign as it relates to the extreme violation that someone has suffered, but it's never enough to truly compensate someone for the loss of a loved one.
And thank you so much for taking on that Maurice Monk case. I had a brief time as a district attorney to oversee the investigation, and as DA, I got the chance to meet his lovely family and his sister, and the church people who supported the family during their worst moment. And there is no amount of money that will ever make the family whole again. So, but it is a way, it has a value.
You're exactly correct. And, as you know, there's chapters sometime in the book of justice. Yeah. And so the first chapter was going through and doing what we did in terms of civil discovery. Second chapter that is still unfolding is a criminal prosecution of those who were responsible. So we still have to remain vigilant. And as you mentioned, the work that we do on the civil side, when it's joined with the work from the district attorney or the prosecutor side, that is how you get justice. Because the truth is, on the civil side, the money is never felt in the pockets or the pensions or on the paycheck of the person who actually caused the harm. The officer, they have the inconvenience of coming to court or dealing with me at a deposition or dealing with you asking tough questions, but ultimately, they get to go on with their life, and that just isn't fair. And that's why it will continue to persist until we have criminal prosecution and financial liability on a personal level.
Right. So tell our listeners how you worked on the Lena Mondragon's case and how you got the case and how you were able to bring it to a successful conclusion.
Sure. That's a case, once again, that, I'll forever live with, because, I'm a parent and, have children, and how life happens and it could come at you fast, as they say. And so she was a young lady that got caught up with some young boys who were a little bit older than her, but they were still boys, still teens. And so they were riding around. They wanted to essentially go for a dip in a swimming pool. She got in the car, her and her cousin. Unbeknownst to them, these young men had been involved in some robberies in the community. Elena hadn't been involved, but she was with people, as they say, company you keep. But the way in which the police and looked at it was that they were all involved, as if they all had to be punished. And so when they got into a car and they were driving off, her boyfriend was in the driver's seat, and officers claimed that he drove at them, and they opened fire with their AR-15 automatic weapons. And the only person that was hit was Alana. The only person that was hit, as her family affectionately calls her, is Abby. She lost her life that day. And it was all swept away and explained away as, hey, her boyfriend forced the officers to open fire and that it was his fault. Well, once we got into the case, when we got into the weeds of the case, we figured out that's not what happened. That these officers actually had used poor tactics. They had lied, they had fabricated their reports, and they had tried to cover up what they did. But they were so bold, so arrogant, so strident in their sense of confidence in the system protecting them, that when we got to trial, they actually one of them brought their kids to court so that they could hear what their father had done and how they had taken this young lady's life. And so you can only imagine the sense of pride I had when I got a chance to see that smug look wiped off their face when the jury verdict came in for exactly what I asked for, which was $21 million. And so, we use that as a lesson, and hopefully it stands as a lesson to the police departments that our community will not stand by and allow them to continue and harm and kill us with impunity.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. It was such an important case and such a great battle to fight. And yes, I remember being shocked that the DA's office charged the driver, her boyfriend, with her murder and basically covered up what the Fremont police officers had done. And one of the officers who actually shot was the president of the Fremont Police Officers Association, and then they gave $10,000 to the DA. It was so messy. And
many people don't know that, how in bed, the police department is with the district attorney's office. They think there's some sort of, guidepost to keep everybody in their lane, but it's anything but that. I tell people all the time, but it's akin to you charging your coworker with a crime and then having to see their kids at the holiday party. It makes for a very uncomfortable situation, which is why many of the officers, the vast majority, will never see the inside of a criminal courtroom, no matter how heinous or tragic or preventable the crime is that they commit against people.
Right. And that's why courageous civil rights lawyers like you have to take up that baton. You also have been working on another case that I was really appreciative of. I think you settled the case of Miles Armstead, which has been in the news lately, and people have there's been so much political drama around enhancements that people forgot the real facts of that case. Tell my listeners about the Miles Armstead case.
Miles Armstead, a man, a family man, a father, a spouse, a husband, a man who had his whole life in front of him. He was a banker, and he chose Oakland, in particular, eastern part of Oakland, to set his roots in order to buy a home and raise his family in. And in the course of buying that home in a economically depressed part of the city that is very much underserved, he found himself dealing with a neighbor who had pronounced mental health issues. And despite this father, calling the police for help, when this person became essentially obsessed with his family, harassing them, what I call a campaign of terror against his family. But it was all interwoven within a mental health issue, as well as gentrification and investment, because this man who had lived in the person who killed Miles had lived in East Oakland essentially his whole life in a particular house with his family. They no longer could afford that house. They were evicted or kicked out, lost the house. The house was bought by an investor, and he began squatting in it. And that house was right next door to the Armstead family. And from there, he began first doorknob ditching, knocking on the doors at odd hours of the day and night. And then it wound up being that he was throwing rocks and bricks through the front window. This family called OPD a number of times. The probation office had even been called by the family, because he was the perpetrator was on probation, on the highest level of probation, but yet was not being supervised. And this went on for months without anyone doing anything. And in fact, the police, they would initially come out maybe an hour or two later, then it turned into them coming out a day or two later to respond to these attacks. And ultimately, they just threw their hands up and they put fire. If they put gasoline on this simmering fire by denigrating Miles and the man, telling them, look, why are you guys acting like girls? We're not coming back out here for this stuff. And if something were to happen, it'd be your fault. And that was very fortuitous, but yet a very tragic and ominous warning, because once the young man, Jamal Thomas, was the perpetrator and the person who killed Miles, once he was served with this restraining order and he was let out of jail, and unbeknownst to the Armsteads had decided to move, put the house up for sale. Jamal Thomas comes back home to the house he lived in, had been squatting in, but this time he was armed with a gun. And he shot Miles Armstead in front of the house that he had bought and was preparing to put on the market to sell in order to keep his family safe. Took his life in front of the neighbors. And at that point in time, the Miles Armstead family was left with no recourse. The system had turned its back on him. did not provide the resources to Jamal Thomas, didn't protect the Armstead family, and ultimately this father of 5 was killed. And so we took that case up. At that time, I was told by other attorneys no one would touch the case. They didn't see a path to justice. There was nothing the city could do. There was nothing the victims of crime could really do. And so we took it upon ourselves to take a chance, because when I sat there and I listened to that mother's pain of losing her husband and having to try to shepherd and raise these kids on her own, it was something that I just could not ignore. And so, as they say in football, we threw the Hail Mary pass. And fortunately, we were able to get a touchdown for that family. And there's been a lot of interest in that case, as it should be, because it's not just the Armstead family. That could happen to anyone. Exactly. And it shouldn't happen to anyone. And if it does happen to somebody, we have to do something about it.
Right. Yeah. You have to hold people accountable. And then you were able to hold the county accountable with a large settlement, but the case was so typical of what I heard as district attorney over and over again, of people with mental health issues in neighborhoods, threatening people, harming people, and our system has a hole in it. There's no place for people with serious mental illness to go. And Mr. Thomas was charged and apparently on probation and adjudicated or, convicted through the prior DA, but, they let him go without any real resources or support. So, the case came to me and I got the bare outlines. I will tell you, I knew nothing of your case or of the things that you had uncovered. I knew that Miles Armstead's wife was pregnant. I knew that about the that they were neighbors, that this happened in a neighborhood, and I knew that he had been shot brutally, and that was such a tragedy, and that we were going to hold Jamal Thomas accountable, and ultimately it was appropriate to add an enhancement, or not to add, I was asked to approve an enhancement, just a bare minimum enhancement. I was asked to approve a lot, but we imposed an enhancement, and recently the judge, in a act of political theater, decided that he would not honor the jury's wishes and add the enhancement. So it's a tragedy all the way around, whether you're looking at the proliferation of guns in our community, too many guns, too many people with guns that should not have guns. As you say, gentrification, the fight for people to have decent places to live, just a whole series of challenges that really contributed to Miles Armstead's death. And it is to your credit that you did not listen to those lawyers who do not have the courage or the experience or the compassion to represent that family. So thank you so much for doing that.
And thank you. I appreciate that. I know the family appreciated just understanding that Jamal Thomas would be prosecuted. And what many people don't understand, when you're reading a headline or a newspaper or the news at night, they don't quite get how the judicial system works. And a prosecutor can make a decision as it relates to charge an enhancement or not. The jury then has to decide whether or not the enhancement is actually going to stick for a conviction. And then many of those enhancements, especially gun enhancements, a juror doesn't know the price, the cost, the fitness that comes with the different enhancements. And many people, especially local people, may recall, I did criminal defense for over a decade, everything from DUI to murder for hire. And I've done those cases with the enhancements. And I've had jurors come up to me months, years later, "Oh, you from that case? What happened to your client?" Because the jury is not there for sentencing.
Right.
They're only there just to check the box for what crime a person is convicted of. Right. And they're not told that, oh, you checked that gun enhancement? Did you know that carries 25 years to life?
Right. Exactly. Right.
Automatically?
Yeah.
No discretion?
Right.
And if they knew it was 5 years, they might be okay with it. I've had a juror literally come up to me, ask me what happened in that case. I tell them, yeah, my 19-year-old client with that gun enhancement, 25 years to life, plus whatever else. So now they're looking at 34 years of life. Nobody died. Everybody recovered. There was mitigating circumstances. Person hadn't been in trouble anymore. And you know what? Yes, they were wrong for having a gun. Yes, we don't like that. But to throw someone away at 19 and you did it as a juror, but you didn't know what you were doing,
Right.
that's a fundamental flaw in our system, in my
Right.
opinion.
I agree. And I will be talking about enhancements on Pamela Price Unfiltered, because you're right. People have no idea. They never heard of it until January of 2023, when people started saying, oh, she's going to do something about enhancements. Well, the California Commission on Sentencing said we should do something about enhancements. Our former mayor and former governor, Jerry Brown, testified before the commission that we should abolish all enhancements, because as prosecutors, it should be our job to make the time fit the crime and not just use enhancements willy-nilly because they are on the books. But that's another show, Pamela Price Unfiltered, another conversation. We have to have you come back and join that conversation.
I have a lot to say. Anybody who's around me knows I certainly have some opinions and been around the block. So,
what do you think makes our work so impactful for the field of, in the broader fight for justice?
well, there is so much injustice in our world. There's a legacy of injustice that's enshrined or embedded within the framework of how our society works. And so, from us being attorneys, civil rights attorneys, I liken it to what Charles Hamilton Houston said: you are either a social engineer or a parasite. And so what I think we're engaged in is we're trying to engineer society 10.0.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah,
We are
right.
trying to be the update to the iPhone, which is our society that is obstinate and unwilling to become more egalitarian, more equal, and have more equity and rights afforded to everyone, not just a subsection with privileges and everyone else is left to figure it out on their own. So, I think that's what makes us special, is because we actually have, not only do we have a voice, but we have the tools, the training, and there's a process meaning the legal process. And that process is not easy. I tell my clients all the time, the law is not set up to allow us to go into court and waltz out with justice.
No.
The law is set up, there's a small loophole for you to fit your case through in order to even have an opportunity to have a shot at justice. And we're just well equipped to do it. But it only, in my opinion, it is enhanced by the participation of the community. And that's the other aspect you asked me earlier about the media, is I'm very much a person who believes that I can fight inside the courtroom, but there's a fight on the courthouse steps and there's a fight in the streets. And they're all equally important in their own ways in terms of contributing to making sure that a family who is aggrieved, that a city and residents who are besieged by a police department actually have a shot, have some chance of getting the justice they deserve.
Thank you, Adante Pointer. So thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for taking your time to come by Pamela Price Unfiltered. And my brother, keep on keeping on.